Most people think the worst thing a family can put in front of you is a casserole they know perfectly well you don't like. Mine put a contract. 18 pages. Printed on heavy cream cardstock, the kind used for wedding invitations, bound in a folder, and set beside the roast like it was part of the menu. I am 41 years old. I have spent 14 years reading documents for a living. By the time my hand reached for that folder, my mother had already stopped breathing normally. She knew I would read it. She just didn't know what I would do when I got to page 4. I had been back in my own apartment for 11 months. One bedroom above a dry cleaner on Rivera Street in Candarin Mills, a town of 9,000 people and one traffic light that blinks amber after 9 at night. I had rented it 2 weeks after my divorce was finalized. €640 a month. The bedroom's ceiling sloped. The radiator knocked every March. It was mine in a way that nothing had been mine in a long time, and some mornings that felt like more than enough. I am a legal assistant at Halberson and Pratt, 2 blocks from the courthouse. Family law. I read documents for a living. I mark the margins. I know where the knives are kept. During my marriage, I had 2 pregnancy losses. My family treated them the way they treated most inconvenient things, as misplaced items, minor disruptions, nothing requiring sustained acknowledgement. That was the water I had been swimming in so long, I had stopped noticing it was cold. That Sunday I had my tax returns spread across the kitchen table and the kettle on. My phone rang. My Aunt Liliana. She called every Sunday, the one member of my family who had never confused loyalty with silence. Elena, your mother is very quiet in a way I don't like. I told her my mother was probably just tired. Elle, she said, your mother doesn't do silence. Your mother does strategy. I laughed. I turned the kettle back on. My Aunt Liliana had been reading weather for 60 years. She could smell a storm through a telephone line. We talked about her orchids. We talked about the Martinez family's roof. Before she hung up, she said, Holy Week is in 2 weeks. I told her I would be there. She said, Good. In our family, that was not an agreement. It was an acknowledgement of receipt. We both knew what that meant. After he hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. Then I opened my laptop, navigated to the contract template library at work, and clicked on a folder labeled Gestational Surrogacy. I read for 2 hours. Women who have been sewn into invisible threads by people who called it kindness. You know exactly how this works. 6 weeks of favors accumulate interest. A spare bedroom becomes a ledger entry. And one day someone slides a folder across a table and expects you to sign your name to the balance. The Saturday before Easter, I drove to my aunt's house. 18 kilometers from town, a farmhouse her husband had left her when he died in 2011. Orchids on every windowsill, purple on the south side, white on the east, yellow in the kitchen where the morning light came through a glass jar. My aunt cultivated orchids the way some women keep secrets. With patience. With a spray bottle. With zero commentary. She had a cherry tart on the table and coffee already poured. Your mother called me on Tuesday, she said. She asked whether I thought you had ever considered having another child. I put my fork down. I told her I thought you had closed that conversation with this family a long time ago. She said, Well, Liliana, times change. My aunt looked at me steadily. Times don't change, Elena. People just get bolder. Then she told me a story I had never heard. About herself at 19. About a pregnancy that her own mother had refused to call by its name. About a decision made in a small room while someone else held the paperwork. She had kept that story inside herself for 53 years. She put it on the table that Saturday morning beside the cherry tart, quietly, without drama, and then she covered my hand with hers. Whatever they ask you, read it. She held my gaze. Don't just listen. Read it. I told her I would. Page 4, she said. The important things are always on page 4. Easter Sunday. I parked in my parents' driveway at 3:30. 5 cars for what my mother had described as a dinner for 4. My father's Volvo. My mother's Renault. My sister Margarita's Volkswagen. Her husband Tristan's truck. and a rental with a Bilbao agency sticker, which meant my Uncle Donato had flown in without mentioning it, which meant he had done it for me, which meant he had been briefed, which meant he knew what was inside the folder before I did. Uncle Donato was my father's cousin, not technically my uncle, a family law specialist in the Basque Country, not my mother's favorite person in the room, which made his presence louder than if he had arrived with a brass band. I sat in my car. I counted the cars twice. 5 cars for 4 people meant my mother had brought witnesses, which meant my mother had brought a verdict. I walked up the cement path past the Easter lilies she had arranged on the porch sometime before noon, still in their supermarket sleeves. I rang the bell. She opened the door too fast. Her smile was too wide. She hugged me harder than she had in 3 years. "Sweetheart," she said. The word sweetheart had not been deployed since 2018. I filed it away. Inside. The chandelier at full brightness at 3:30 in the afternoon in April. The chandelier my mother had bought for a funeral and never taken down, which told you everything you needed to know about the aesthetic principles of the women in my family. Tristan stood by the sideboard holding a cold tea he wasn't drinking. His handshake had the consistency of a man trying to remember whether he locked the car. My sister Margarita stood in the arch between the kitchen and the dining room. She held my gaze 1 second too long. She was wearing a blush-colored blouse I had seen exactly once before at her 10th wedding anniversary. It was her asking for something blouse. Uncle Donato gave me a small wave from the sofa. He didn't get up. He didn't speak. And then I saw the folder, cream-colored, thick, sitting on the sideboard beside the serving tray, as though it had always been part of the table setting. Someone had taken the trouble to align the paper clip on the first page. In the living room, my second cousin's youngest daughter, Elisa, age 7, was watching an animated film with the volume turned up. My mother had put her there deliberately. Elisa would not hear what was coming. We sat. My mother at the head of the table. My father at the other end. Margarita and Tristan on one side. Me alone on the other. Uncle Donato 2 chairs down, far enough that the distance looked casual. My father said grace. My mother served the roast. We talked about the Martinez roof. We talked about whether there might be one more frost. Margarita didn't touch her wine. Tristan's leg bounced under the table at a rhythm I could count. My mother kept glancing at the sideboard. I ate a piece of roast, a spoonful of green beans, a sip of wine. I waited. My family never approached the point directly. My family circled the point. They asked about your job, your apartment, the mileage on your car. And then, just when you had let out your breath, they placed the matter on your plate like a knife beside the fork. My mother cleared her throat at 3 minutes and 6 seconds. "Elena, sweetheart, your sister and Tristan have been thinking about something. A path forward for them. We wanted to discuss it as a family." I put my fork down. I smiled with a polite smile I reserved for the firm's client dinners. "Of course," I said. Margarita turned toward the sideboard. She didn't look at me. Tristan studied his plate. My mother's hands were clasped in her lap beneath the table, the same gesture she had made in 1996 when she wanted me to quit the school play and in 2004 when she wanted me to break up with a boy named Caleb. Margarita picked up the folder. My mother spoke for 2 minutes and 40 seconds without taking a breath, which told me she had memorized it. Altruistic surrogacy. A beautiful option. A gift of love between sisters. Modern medicine had made it practically safe. And me, I was in a transitional moment. This could be a meaningful time. A family time. The word family appeared 7 times. I counted. Then Margarita reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes were wet on the left side in the specific way that takes practice. "Elena," she said, "you're the only one who can do this." I let her hand stay on mine. I didn't squeeze back. In my family, "you're the only one who can do this" is always meant, "you're the only one we haven't fully exhausted yet." "I need to understand what you're asking," I said. My mother's face changed. The soft voice evaporated. Her jaw tightened the same way it had in 1993 when I told her I didn't want to continue piano lessons. "Elena, your sister took you in when you had nowhere to go. You owe her this." The word owe. delivered with the same cadence she had used in 1996 when I borrowed her sewing scissors and forgot to return them. I looked at my father. He nodded. I looked at Tristan. He was looking at his plate. Uncle Donato stirred his tea. The ice had started to melt. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, smoothed it once with 2 fingers, and asked to see what they had prepared. My sister's hand went for the folder before I finished the sentence. She slid it across the tablecloth toward me, as though serving a dish. And I understood in that instant that she had rehearsed that movement. In this same room, with my mother watching, the folder contained 18 pages of heavy cream cardstock. Not printer paper, the kind used for wedding invitations. Someone had paid for it. The cover read, Altruistic Gestational Surrogacy Agreement between Margarita Ana Calvo, intended mother, and underscore gestational carrier. The blank line was for my signature. They hadn't filled it in. That alone told me something. I'd like to read it now if you don't mind, I said. My mother gave a small, dismissive laugh. Oh, sweetheart, you don't need to read every word. Uncle Donato reviewed it with lawyers. It's all standard. I looked at Uncle Donato. Uncle Donato did not look at me.
Mom.
I'm a legal assistant. I kept my voice even. I can always tell a contract written to intimidate. The margins narrow around the clauses that matter. I know what you are, Elena, she said with a small edge in her voice, like the rim of a tin can. I'm just saying we don't need to turn a family dinner into a deposition. Tristan said, very quietly, without looking at my sister. Let her read it. Margarita's head turned toward him exactly 1 centimeter and stopped. I opened to page 1, pressed the spine flat with the side of my hand, and began. Page 1 was a cathedral of language, vaulted ceilings of generosity, architecture built from the words gift and family and love. I read aloud at the pace I use at work, 1 sentence per breath. Clear, measured, giving nothing away. The word altruistic appeared 4 times before the end of page 1. In my profession, 3 times more than necessary. The parties enter this agreement freely, without coercion, with full knowledge of the rights herein granted and waived. I did not say the word coercion aloud. I filed it. My mother began to look satisfied with herself. My sister's shoulders dropped 1/2 centimeter. I had read dozens of contracts in my career that opened with the word freely on page 1. 90% of them had engineered the coercion by page 4. Page 2 introduced the money, which is where altruism historically begins to sweat. A carefully itemized list of reimbursable expenses. €400 per trimester for maternity clothing, payable to Margarita. €800 per month for dietary supplements, payable to Margarita. Mileage to and from the clinic, deposited into a joint account in Margarita's name. Parking at the Reproductive Medicine Center, capped at €24 per appointment. In no place on page 2 did money flow toward me. I noted this without comment and kept reading. Page 3 told me what they wanted from my body, clause by clause, all of it branded. Mandatory diet. Weekly mandatory weight monitoring. Mandatory bed rest from the moment the intended mother's doctor, not mine, recommended it. Mandatory prenatal vitamins, brand specified, no substitutions without written consent. Travel restriction, prohibited from traveling more than 2 hours from my primary residence without written authorization from the intended mother. Mandatory biweekly psychological sessions with a therapist designated by the intended mother. Clause 8. The gestational carrier agrees to abstain from any voluntary medical decision without prior written authorization. I would not receive my own medical information. I would not call my own doctor. I would not see my own test results. I would be, in legal terms, a room with a refrigerator, and my sister would hold the only key. 3 years earlier, a family court judge in Madrid had stood at a lectern in a conference room and said the phrase coercive language to 300 people over lukewarm coffee. She had drawn a diagram on a whiteboard. She had said, "You'll recognize it when you see it, and you'll see it most often on page 2. I had written it in a spiral notebook I still owned. She had not mentioned that sometimes it waited until page 3. I turned the page. My sister straightened her back. My mother touched her lip with a napkin. Uncle Donato had not moved in 4 minutes and had begun to sweat. Someone at an expensive law firm had billed by the hour to write the sentence that turned my body into a room with the lock on the outside. I read it without changing my breathing. I had trained for 14 years not to change my breathing in public. And then I reached Clause 11. The intended mother retains exclusive authority to select embryo characteristics, including but not limited to genetic sex, and reserves the right, at her sole discretion, to request termination of pregnancy prior to gestational week 24, should genetic screening results not conform to preferred parameters. I read it. Read it again. I did not breathe differently. Inside my chest, something small and quiet closed. A contract that asks you to house a pregnancy with a return policy is not a gift. It is a lease agreement. I work with lease agreements. Genetic sex. Preferred parameters. Sole discretion. Termination of pregnancy. For phrases that turn my body into a vehicle that could be stopped and emptied if the contents came in the wrong packaging. I raised my eyes slowly. Not to Margarita. To Tristan. Tristan was the color of soap. His lips were slightly parted. His hand was flat on the table as though trying to stabilize a house in an earthquake only he could feel. Then I looked at my sister. Her expression had not changed. She was waiting for me to keep reading. She was not surprised. I understood then about Clause 11. She had written it, or requested it, or signed off on it. She knew. My mother reached for her wine and took a long, slow sip. Set it down with a small sound against the water glass. I turned to Clause 12. My mother, for the first time all evening, did not meet my eyes. Clause 12 was the point of the entire document. Clauses 1 through 11 were the handle. Clause 12 was the blade. In the event the gestational carrier withdraws consent at any point following the signing of this agreement, she shall be obligated to reimburse in full all prior expenses related to in vitro fertilization incurred by the intended parents in the amount of €118,427 plus applicable legal fees. €118,427. Not rounded up. Not rounded down. Written to the last cent someone had wanted the cents. I looked at the number. My apartment costs €640 a month. My car was 12 years old. My divorce settlement had left me with savings that covered 14 months of rent if nothing went wrong. If I signed this document and then said no, not if I breached it, but if I withdrew my consent at any moment after signing, which as a legal assistant I understood meant that every future no would cost me everything I had. My apartment, my car, my savings, probably my salary, once they went after my wages. They had not made the yes impossible. They had made the no unaffordable. I set the folder down. I looked at the mark my thumb had left on the margin beside Clause 10. A small crescent. The legal assistant's trick. Not visible unless you knew where to look. I thought about what my Aunt Liliana had told me that Saturday morning. About a room. A small decision made for her. 53 years of silence. I reached into my bag for the pen she had given me at Christmas. Blue ink. Fine tip. Never returned. I uncapped it. The click was louder than it had any right to be. I did not raise my eyes. I found Clause 11 on page 4, and I drew a circle around it. Slow and clean. Steady pressure. The kind of circle you learn to draw around a clause a judge will need to see without ambiguity. I finished the circle. I placed the pen on top of the folder diagonally across the clauses, the way you place a witness mark over evidence. Closed the folder. Slid it back across the tablecloth with both hands, the way you return a serving dish. Steady, polite, no fracture in the surface. I stood up. Collected my bag. My sister's mouth opened. My mother's hand flew to her own throat. My father closed his eyes once, slowly, as though against a very bright light. Tristan did not move. Uncle Donato put down his tea. I did not raise my voice. I understand what each of you said tonight. I won't forget it. I walked around the table. I kissed my father on the forehead because my Aunt Liliana had told me once, in a cold barn in November, that dignity is the only thing you cannot recover after you spend it, and that you should not miss the chance to offer grace to a man who has been nodding himself into smaller and smaller rooms. My father did not look up. My mother made a small, muffled sound. Elena. I walked to the front door. In the living room, Elisa was still watching her film. A giraffe on the screen. She did not turn her head. She did not see any of it. I opened the door and closed it behind me with one hand. Not a slam, just the sound of a latch settling into place. Behind me, as I walked to my car, my sister made the first honest sound of the evening. Not crying. A small, low, animal sound. Through the closed door. I did not turn around. She had asked me to give her a child. Instead, I gave her my silence. And my silence turned out to be considerably louder. I drove home at exactly the speed limit, which in my family is what people do when they're furious. I took the county road because it was longer and I needed the longer route. My hands on the wheel were steady. I checked my face twice in the mirror. I did not look like a woman who had just walked out of a coordinated intervention. I looked like a woman driving home from a roast dinner. My phone on the passenger seat began to vibrate. Margarita, voicemail. My mother, voicemail. My father, text message. Please come back. Your mother is upset. Uncle Donato, silence. He wouldn't call. He was calculating. I did not stop at home. I turned left at the blinking amber light and drove 10 minutes further to my aunt's house. She opened the door, looked at me once, and put the kettle on without speaking. It was 9:15. The orchids on the windowsill caught the porch light. The kitchen smelled of the morning's cherry tart, still faintly warm from reheating. I sat at her table. I told her everything. The folder, the 18 pages, the sentence my mother had memorized, Uncle Donato and his melting ice, the roast and its garnishes, the brand name vitamins on page 3, clause 11, clause 12, the circle I had drawn. My aunt listened without interrupting. Her hands were folded on the table. Her wedding ring, which she had never once removed, caught the light under the single bulb. When I finished, she said, "You did right." I did right. Yes. She poured 2 cups of tea. But it's not finished, sweetheart. She looked at me steadily. Your sister printed that contract on 18 pages of good cardstock. She is going to need it to be someone else's fault. Watch what she does before Wednesday. What will she do? My aunt's mouth moved at one corner. She'll make it public. She's her mother's daughter. She was right about the day. She was generous by one. Tuesday arrived at 7:04 in the morning when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. My colleague and fellow legal assistant Delia. A screenshot. This is about you. Margarita had posted a long, theatrical paragraph on Facebook. She did not name me. She described me as a close family member, someone I loved, someone I trusted, who had, in what Margarita called a deeply painful moment, chosen her own comfort over our family's dream. She wrote about 10 years of trying, about her faith, about the forgiveness she was actively working to extend. There were already 31 comments. 3 cousins had liked it. A woman named Ines Moran from Margarita's book club had written, "I am so sorry for what you're going through." Margarita had responded with a red heart. My mother had shared the post with the caption, "Our hearts are broken, but we trust in God." Not one word was a lie. Not one word was honest. I made coffee. I read the post 3 times and the comments twice. Then I texted Delia, "Can you come tonight? I need help redacting an 18-page contract." She responded in under 20 seconds. "Do we burn everything?" I said, "No. We do it like legal assistants." She said, "I'll bring black markers." Coming after work. Delia arrived at 7:15 with a box of permanent markers and a bottle of something neither of us should have opened on a weeknight. My kitchen table became a workspace. I retrieved the photocopy I had made Friday afternoon on the office machine between 2 client files, 18 pages of cream cardstock reproduced on white office paper, every line legible. We worked page by page. Every name, blacked out. Every address, blacked out. Every signature line, blacked out. The law firm's letterhead, gone. Uncle Donato's initials on page 2, gone. The intended mother's full legal name, gone. What we left visible, the full body text, every clause number, every specific word of coercion. The phrase altruistic gestational surrogacy. The word irrevocable. The phrase sole discretion. The phrase termination of pregnancy. The number, €118,427 plus applicable legal fees. The language told the story. The language was the accusation. At 10:40, I drafted a statement. 180 words. I did not mention my sister, my mother, or my family. I wrote, "This is a surrogacy contract handed to me at a family dinner, printed on good cardstock, and presented for my signature that same evening without independent legal counsel. I am a legal assistant. I recognize the language on page for as coercive. I am sharing this document with all identifying information fully redacted because I believe other women in my life need to know what language to watch for. Please read page 4. Delia read it once, then twice. Elena, she said, this is the 18 most elegant pages of a demolition I have ever seen. I said, thank you. By midnight we had 18 pages of black bars and one number left visible because numbers, in my experience, are the only part of a contract that cannot hide. Wednesday, 8 in the morning. I press publish. Facebook, then LinkedIn, then an anonymous thread in a legal consultation forum. I tagged no one, named no one, attached the redacted PDF and my 180 words. Then I made a second coffee and went to work. By 10 the post had been shared 400 times. By 2 in the afternoon 3,000. By Thursday morning a journalist from the local paper had emailed. A reproductive rights lawyer from Zaragoza had shared the post with the caption, "This is a masterclass in why independent counsel matters." A family law podcast from Barcelona had written to me on LinkedIn. I forwarded everything to Delia. She handled the press. I handled my tea. In the comments, a woman named Brenda wrote, "This is the contract from Margarita Calvo's Facebook post yesterday." I recognize the €118,000 figure. I don't know what to say. Another, I went to school with Margarita. She's a school principal. This can't be hers. A third, it is hers. She talked about the IVF at a parent council meeting last year. By Thursday afternoon, Margarita's Tuesday post had disappeared. My mother's share followed an hour later. Uncle Donato blocked me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and with specific and personal precision, on the mobile payment app we had used to split restaurant bills at Christmas. My Aunt Liliana called Thursday evening. She only said, "Saturday I have a cherry tart ready." By Thursday night, Margarita had deleted 7 years of Facebook. My mother had deleted one. Thursday at 6:47, a knock at my door. Tristan. Standing in my hallway in the clothes he wore to sell medical equipment to hospitals. Gray trousers, navy polo, company lanyard still around his neck. He wasn't carrying anything. He didn't ask to come in. I didn't invite him. I didn't close the door. "I'm not here to apologize on her behalf," he said. "I know. I'm here because I should have said something at that table. I knew by page 3. I knew before page 3. He didn't look up from his shoes. "Your mother drafted most of clause 11. She called it a lever. She said if you had an exit you would take it, and they needed to close the exit." He stopped. "Tristan." "Yes." "Why are you telling me this?" He raised his eyes. "Because I've been married to my wife for 14 years, and last Sunday at that table I realized I don't know her." A silence. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Now tell yourself. Out loud. In your car, on the way home. I'm not the one who needs to hear it." He nodded. He didn't cry in my hallway. He waited until he reached the stairwell. I heard him there for about a minute. I did not go after him. I closed the door and put the kettle on. Tristan was in a hotel by Friday afternoon. In a town of 9,000 people, that is the geographic definition of he has left. Delia's cousin worked the front desk. Delia knew everything in our town within 36 hours. That combination of legal assistant instinct and small-town infrastructure had kept me afloat that week. Saturday afternoon, my sister called. Not a voicemail, not a text. She called. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. "Elena." Her voice was not grief. It was fury. "You destroyed my marriage." I was standing at my kitchen counter. the pot cooling on the stove. No, Margarita. I didn't destroy your marriage. You drafted Clause 11 with our mother. I read it aloud. Those are different things. A long silence. You are a vindictive person, Elena. I want you to know that. I considered for one long second the dozen things I could have said. Every dinner where I had stayed quiet while our mother talked over me. Every Christmas handshake from Tristan. Every time my own story had been confiscated and returned to me with a new cover. I said none of them. Goodbye, Margarita. I hung up. A family like ours is like puff pastry. If you work it too hard, it breaks, and there is no reassembling it with cold water. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel powerful. I felt tired in the particular way you feel tired after completing a task that has waited 41 years. In June, the school board where Margarita served as principal opted for what they called a new directional approach for the coming academic year. Some parents had raised concerns at the April council meeting. The board did not mention me, the contract, or any name. They simply did not renew her contract. I did not celebrate it. People who publish statements don't want a conversation. They want the last word written in bold. The last word Margarita had, in the end, was the silence she maintained after she lost her audience. The following Sunday, 1 week after Easter, my father came to my apartment alone. No coat. Without my mother. My father had not come to my apartment alone in 11 months. My father had not gone anywhere alone in years. I let him in, pointed to the second-hand sofa, made coffee. He sat with his hands flat on his knees, the way he sits in church. I read what you published, he said. I read it 3 times. Your mother has been telling me all week that you're ungrateful. A pause. His voice had a small tremor that was not performance. And I nodded. I have been nodding for 41 years. I didn't respond. I didn't know what answer would be useful. Tonight, he said, I'm going to tell your mother I won't sit at a table where something like that folder is allowed. He looked at his coffee. I wanted you to know before I told her. We drank coffee in silence for 11 minutes. I counted. It was the longest conversation we had ever had. By summer, he had moved out of the main bedroom, not out of the house, into the guest room, which had until that week been my mother's sewing room. Neither of them commented on it. My Aunt Liliana came to my apartment every Sunday, orchids in one hand, tart in the other, and watered my windowsill plants without asking. In August, over birthday dinner at a roadside cafe, Delia asked me, casually between the last bites of tart, whether I had ever thought about adoption. I had been waiting 11 months for someone to ask me the question I had not allowed myself to ask myself. I began the foster-to-adopt assessment process in September. A social worker named Juana Reynaldo, 53 years old, former school counselor, warm hands, and a ballpoint pen she clicked when she was thinking. I filled out every form twice. I read every consent document 3 times with the same attention I had given Clause 11. I was not going to miss anything. I told my Aunt Liliana first.
She cried.
My Aunt Liliana does not cry. She wept into a kitchen towel at her sink and then said, I'm going to need a second shelf for the orchids. I told my father next. He said, tell me which appointments to come to. I let him come to 3. It was enough. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my sister. The branch of my family that had tried to rent my body was not going to be informed about the daughter I was trying to find. 14 months after Easter Sunday, a Tuesday afternoon in June. 2nd floor of the Provincial Child Services Building. Tired gray carpet. Good light from the west-facing windows. She was 3 years old. She was wearing a pink dress with one missing button. Her sneakers had white scuff marks on the toes. Her hair was in 2 uneven braids made by a foster mother named Carol, who had braided more children's hair than anyone I had ever met and who would send me, later that year, the first photograph ever taken of my daughter. I had brought a stuffed giraffe. I had been keeping it in the passenger seat of my Corolla for a week, waiting for that afternoon. The giraffe had a floppy neck and one slightly crooked eye. I had chosen it at a second-hand market on a Saturday, after spending an hour picking up every stuffed animal on the shelf and putting them back. I knelt down, not too close. She was studying me.
Hi, I said.
I'm Elena. I brought you a giraffe. Do you like giraffes? She considered the giraffe.
Considered me.
Considered the question. Then she said, "It's soft." "I know," I said. That was our first conversation. She picked up the giraffe by one ear. She didn't exactly smile. She made a small thing with her mouth that was not a smile, and was also not a smile. Juana was watching. Juana's eyes were wet. She said nothing. She clicked her pen once. I did not yet know that by October she would call me Mama. I did not yet know that by Christmas I would be unable to remember what my apartment sounded like without her in it. I only knew, sitting on that tired gray carpet with a 3-year-old examining a second-hand giraffe, that something I had not allowed myself to hope for was beginning to happen.
January.
21 months after Easter Sunday. A family courtroom, second floor. Judge Mary Bell Hartwell, silver hair, reading glasses on a chain. She had processed 3 adoptions that week. Ours was the last of the afternoon.
Present me.
Leona, 3.5, in a yellow dress that had never been worn before, staring at her own shiny shoes. My Aunt Liliana in a robin's egg wool coat. My father, who had driven alone. Delia in the back row, with a camera. Juana. Carol, the foster mother, who had asked to attend. Deliberately absent. My mother. My sister. Uncle Donato. None of them had tried to come. The judge leaned forward and spoke to Leona gently. The way judges speak in adoption hearings when they have been doing this long enough to understand it is a kind of sacred paperwork. "Are you ready to be officially Leona Barrett?" Leona nodded with great seriousness. "Yes." The judge signed. Delia took a photograph that I still keep on my refrigerator. In the hallway afterward, my aunt pressed a small pot into my hands. A white orchid, not yet bloomed. A tight green stem just beginning to show.
"She needs one of her own," my aunt said.
My father picked Leona up. It was the first time he had held a grandchild in 8 years. His hands were careful on her back. He said to her, "Hello, granddaughter." She rested her cheek on his shoulder. I said quietly to my aunt, I did the opposite of what they asked. I became a mother without them. My aunt squeezed my hand.
"No, sweetheart.
You became a mother because of what you refused to do. That's not the same thing." I held the orchid. I watched my father rock my daughter gently in the light of the hallway. At Easter I had been someone's potential vessel. By January I was someone's mother. A Saturday morning, 3 months after the courthouse. My kitchen. Sunlight through the window above the sink, the way it comes in every Saturday morning.
The kettle on.
A yellow dress on a hook by the back door for afternoons when Leona decides she wants to put it on again. She is at the table with a board book about a small brown rabbit who lost a shoe and found it and put it back on. She narrates it to herself in the serious voice children use when they are translating the world. The orchid my aunt gave her is on the windowsill. It has bloomed. It will bloom again. I pour water over a tea bag. I think about the clauses. I think about the folder. I think about chandeliers bought for funerals and dining rooms where a woman sits alone on one side of a table while 4 people sit on the other. I think about my aunt, who kept a sentence inside herself for 53 years, finally said it at a kitchen table on a Saturday morning beside a cherry tart, and lived long enough to watch a niece refuse to become her. A kind woman is not a soft woman. She is a woman who chooses every morning not to become the people who hurt her. I chose at 41. I have kept choosing every morning since. They put a contract in front of me and expected me to sign without reading. What they forgot, what they had always forgotten, is that I read for a living. I read everything, especially page 4.